Hello, everyone, and welcome to the PRovoke Media podcast, which today is also coming to you in video. And I'm very happy to be joined by James Wright, who's the global CEO of Havas Red, also the global chairman of Havas PR, based in Australia now. I think previously you were based in the US for many years. And James, it's really interesting to have you on today because we're going to talk about building a global PR network in the modern era. If we were to observe the market over the past 10 years, and you yourself have worked at some of the traditional global PR networks, I think it's fair to say that the legacy networks have struggled over the last decade. They have not necessarily grown at the same rate as the market around the world. And they seem to be hampered by structural issues and in some cases, issues in terms of ownership and so forth. So with all that in mind, why would you create a global PR network now?
Yeah, great question. I think, well, back in 2017, 2018, when I was talking to my colleagues in the Havas group around how we could better knit the global network together and almost talking myself into a job of running the global PR network. It was, I felt like we were hiding our light under a bushel, and we weren't as big and as powerful and as successful as we could be on the global stage if we actually thought about our assets more strategically. And so, I was very much kind of encouraged and supported to take that thought and run with it. And in 2018 was given the mantle to try and make sense of all of our PR assets in the global PR network, and to create what we have today in the Havas PR network, but also, of course, Havas Red, which is now our global consumer agency that launched in the middle of 2019 and now is close to 5 years old and is in 18 markets around the world and growing very, very successfully. Indeed, we had sort of a 20% growth year on year between 23 to 22. So we're a calendar year from a financial year perspective. So, great success there. But I think, we didn't come with a legacy or perhaps some of those kind of inherited challenges of how things were structured. We're essentially, I was given the opportunity to turn it into a network for today. And to your point at the start of this podcast, how do you create a global PR network, for the modern era? And that's really what we try to do. We really are the new kids on the block, and we're now competing and moving up the value chain in a big way in terms of the clients we're attracting, the talent we're attracting, and of course also some of the industry recognition we're getting.
So before you were at Havas, you were at Grayling, for example, and so you have experience of working in some of the traditional networks, and you probably saw the challenges and the opportunities up close. Were there any lessons you took from those experiences that have kind of helped you in terms of building a network across multiple countries?
I mean, I was super lucky at Grayling to work with some amazing people, and some of those amazing people now work in Havas and Havas Red. And so I've actually, got a lot of people that I've worked with over a long period of time that know me, and I know them, and I know their strengths, and they know mine, and also our blind spots too. And that's just as important to understand where you're not so good. And so, you bring people in that can ensure that you have that covered. I think when you become obsessed with chasing revenue targets and you become sort of focused purely on growth as a strategy, it can become challenging. And within Havas, we're very lucky that we're still majority owned by a family, and we're given more, I guess, leeway than perhaps the other holding groups in looking at more longer term plays. And that's really what's happened here with the PR network, where we've been allowed to, given time, to grow and develop this now very defined PR group. And how many brands we had back in 2018 and 19 before I took the global role. I think we had 26, 20 or 28 sort of PR brands around the world. And, now we're very much down to 7 or 8. And some of them are quite, specific PR agencies or comms agencies that live in their own, very much their own identified swim lanes. But definitely around, we're always been about people, and we're always going to be about people. I think, regardless of technology developments and AI, my view on that is that, AI will make us better, but we always have to be better than AI. And I think, our people are at the center of that. And so hiring great people, getting out of their way, giving them the opportunity to develop and really own the area and the sort of direction that you've sort of pointed them in. We've created a wonderful content marketing business in Red Connect that's part of Havas Red that, a former colleague of mine who worked with Havas in Australia for many years, I kind of hired back into the group to sort of run that. Mark Campbell's done a phenomenal job. Hiring Rachel Sansom, who runs Havas Red UK and now given the role across Europe, who used to work in the Huntsworth network that Braden was part of, obviously in another Red business, the Red Consultancy. Hiring people what they're good at and getting out of their way, I think was super important, and really being very focused on ensuring that you're set up for, what your clients need tomorrow, not just today. And so trying to get ahead of that, because you think of the roles that we have in PR agencies here in 2024, a lot of those roles didn't exist 4 or 5 years ago. And so you've got to make sure you've got enough flex in your model and in that blueprint you've created to ensure that you're ready to take that next step with whatever changes and trends and developments happen within our industry.
So in terms of the proposition, for Havas Red specifically, how complicated was it kind of bring everything together and then go out to the market almost as a new brand in a way in many places, right? And what was the reception like from clients?
So it was very helpful that I'd been in the group and in a place like Australia previously. So I moved out of Grayling, had a global role there, but I was based out of the London office, operated obviously in lots of markets all around the world, and had fantastic bosses that gave me opportunities that have enabled me to be where I am today, and I'm very grateful for that. But when we created, I sort of developed the Red brand as it was just in Australia and in APAC, because we were kicking so many goals. I mean, I think we were winning Agency of the Year, left, right, and centre in different award shows. We were winning Lions at Cannes. We had this great kind of track record of being one of the most creative agencies in the group. And suddenly there was a PR agency in the group that was winning, more awards than the advertising agencies were, and actually feeding the advertising agencies with leads from clients. That gave me, I think, a lot of runway to take the global role because people wanted part of that. People wanted to be part of success. They wanted to be part of momentum. And because in big groups, the reality is, you never want to be a threat to someone. And it was just me. I'd worked with all of these people for a long time and helped them, and they'd help me. And so we had this kind of friendship that went beyond just the pure professional relationship. And so when I asked for favors or I asked people to help me develop this, it was very easy in many senses, because people were really, I'd got enough favors in the can, or they've got favors in the can with me, to build on those relationships. And so when I wanted to rebrand, part of the agency in the US, to do a startup in London when we already had 4 or 5 other PR brands in London, to rebrand the agencies in Spain. We had a small Havas PR team in the Middle East now that is now 60, 70 people as Havas Red, that's just, won so many different awards in so many different shows that actually all can be done. And, in our group, a lot of the countries have a country CEO. And so it's important you get their buy-in if you're actually going to do anything with any parts of their business. But because most of our, leadership are out of media agencies or advertising traditionally, when they're looking for a PR expert, it's you're it. And so, if you present, it's like any sort of smart business person, you present a good business case and what you can do for them and how you can grow their market. They were all in that. And as we launched in the US and as we launched in the UK, as the 2 initial markets outside of Singapore, Australia, and some smaller countries in Asia, we started to kick goals. We started to gain momentum. It was then a much easier task for us to look at, the Middle East, to look at Spain, to look at, Germany and Italy, and then sort of go from there. And that momentum has continued. And, you know, just to be, you know, honest as well, I spend a lot of time talking to those markets. I have monthly meetings with all of our MDs and CEOs across the PR group in every market. I also catch up with the group CEOs for those markets for the Havas Village, which is the physical office that we have that all of in most markets or a lot of cities is where all of our agencies are housed, to ensure that we're doing all the right things and how can we serve the village better, how can we serve our sister agencies better, and just maintaining those relationships is super important. And, you know, never to take yourself too seriously either, you know, and if things aren't working, let's be honest about it and let's put that on the table and, you know, move on quickly from it. I'd rather fail fast. And, you know, fortunately, we haven't failed too much in too many places, but where we have, whether it's with the wrong hire, the wrong structure, or the wrong go-to-market strategy, I think, you know, we've moved past that pretty quickly and then moved forward, you know, in a new way. And I think it's been easier for me to do that in this setup than perhaps it would have been in one of the other more traditionally established agencies where there's a lot of there's a lot of egos involved. Often there's a lot of history and legacy there that's hard to unwind. Whereas actually, people seem to be wanting change, being wanted actually to be agile and nimble around the decisions that we were making. And I'm sure that's not going to be the same forever, Aaron. You know, I'm sure in the coming years it's going to be harder to make those kind of changes and differences. But I certainly don't want it to be like that. But I imagine it is going to get a little bit tougher. But at the moment, we're enjoying, you know, some great momentum and some great wins that we're picking up all around the world.
It's interesting because when we were talking about this podcast, you said we don't have to be the biggest, but we do have to be bigger. And so I wonder, first of all, why did you need to be bigger? And secondly, is there a point where you can get too big?
Well, my point about being bigger is because when a client, we need to have the roles that every market needs us to have to cover the work that clients need us to do. So, for example, in the last 4 or 5, 6 years, you've seen the sort of explosion in social and content roles. You know, 10 years ago, we didn't have content managers, content producers, social strategists. You know, we have those in the middle of every agency now. We've got data analysts. So we need to be bigger so that we're not giving those away that opportunity to do that work for our clients. You know, we have always designed ourselves as what we call a merged media agency because media is converging, it's merging, and to a consumer when they consume information, or even actually anyone about a corporate business as well, any information you hear from about a business is the jigsaw that makes up that story of the brand, that story of the client, and the story that they want to tell. And so we need to have that capability in the markets where the expectation is that we are managing their owned assets as well as, you know, doing their earned work and their more strategic comms activities. So to be bigger, we need to ensure that we're not missing out on that opportunity to tell that whole merged media story, that holistic, integrated story that a client has. You know, data analytics, I think, is just going to become more and more important to drive those insights that we need. So, and I think, you know, also in markets like the US, we need to be bigger because, you know, we need to be able to cover the whole country, and you know, it's a series of micro markets, frankly. And so, you know, when you recognize that, you know, you can't do necessarily a big national campaign, or you're going to miss opportunities if you're purely doing it from the viewpoint of New York or from the viewpoint of San Francisco. Actually, kind of, there's so much media there and so much runway, frankly, left with earned media that you could potentially be missing a huge opportunity for clients to drive conversations in communities and with audiences that they want to reach. So that's why it wants to be bigger. I mean, can you become too big? I think, yes, you can become too big if you don't have the mindset of being able to change quickly. You know, I think with big does come often challenges with change. I think that we've been able to do revolution rather than evolution in terms of how we've gone about those changes. And as I say, you know, I'm not going to sit here and say that's going to be like that forever. As I mentioned before, I think, you know, it is going to become tougher as we grow and become bigger. But if I keep the people I've got around me at the moment that have the same mindset as myself, which is that, it's almost like the day one strategy of Amazon. It's like thinking about, every day is day one. If we keep thinking that way, I think we can keep thinking, with that agileness and with that thought that actually we also need to be set up to service the client's needs of tomorrow.
You've also grown via acquisition. And I wonder, is that something that's a priority for you looking ahead? Is it more geographic, or is it more focused on specific service areas?
Yeah, so the sort of acquisition piece for us has been sort of threefold. There's been we have geographic gaps in the Havas PR network. We just did. We had one, for example, in India, which last year, India is such a critical market now. It's growing, it's developing. We have big assets as well across the Havas Group and in Vivendi, our mothership in India. We need to be there. To cover an APAC client, we need to be in places like India. So another one for us is South America. We don't have an owned PR operation in South America, so we've got to look at that in the future. We did a startup in Africa because there's client needs there that we need, and it started in Joburg last year, and we just opened in the Ivory Coast because, again, clients are coming to us asking for PR support in other parts of the Havas Group. So one part is geographic. Second part is capability. Looking at markets where there's a capability that we're missing in the agency. It could be content, it could be social, it could be influencer, it could be more consumer chops, it could be more corporate chops. And so depending on what that requirement is and where we see the market opportunity, we may look at a capability opportunity there. The third one is bandwidth. And so to my point about, like, say, the US, it's not necessarily that we don't do all of the pieces that we need to. It's not a capability issue per se. It's actually, we just need to have bigger presence, for example, in the middle of the country or on the West Coast or wherever that might be. And so, when you align those sort of different parts of the strategy, each market then has different priorities. And so, I'm looking at some of particularly the key big strategic markets that are really going to drive our business both commercially and creatively. What is it? Is it a geographic gap? Is it capability gap? Is it a bandwidth gap that we have? And so, we've been the most active holding group for the last 3 years in terms of acquisition. You take away the VCs and other groups. You look at the holding groups. It's Havas that are doing more deals than anyone else. And so, we are active in that space, but we're very, we don't buy revenue. We buy for strategy, and I think that's why those three components are super important to me when I look at each market. Now, there is a fourth, which is that a great asset just comes on the market and you hear about it, you're told about it, you've got consultants calling you about it. And obviously then you would also look into that, because as much as you might have a strategy for acquisition, the reality is there may not be an agency that ticks all the boxes you have, but then something else comes on on the market. Maybe it's a brand experience business, and actually you hadn't really thought about brand experience for that market, but it's an amazing agency doing great growth, great work, great creative work, and there's a great culture fit. So we might look at them. So, but generally that's how we look at it, though, in those three buckets in terms of geography, capability, and bandwidth. And
are there areas in which you want to get bigger, for example? And is that, for example, specific geographies, or in terms of particular capabilities?
Yeah, I think we've got plenty of room to grow in the US and in Western Europe for sure. I think we need to understand what the opportunity for us is in South America. I think I sit now, having moved back to Sydney, and I'm here most of the time now. I'm sort of overseas, sort of 2 or 3 weeks every quarter in the US and Europe primarily. But I think we're good. I think here, maybe there's a couple of strategic acquisitions we'll look at in APAC. But without giving too much commercial kind of insight away, at any one time, I'm probably talking to 7 or 8 different agencies about an acquisition. Now, as the saying goes, you kiss a lot of frogs to find a prince, and that goes for both you as the acquirer and them as the seller. And then, hopefully, you'll date enough and you like each other that you want to get married, kind of thing. But I can't, for everyone that you meet, you probably everyone that you meet that you do a deal with, you probably also met 6 or 7 at the same time in other markets. So yeah, we're very active in the market, Aaron. That's what I would say.
And just staying on this topic, what do you make of the sort of huge influx of private equity money into the public relations industry? I can remember a time where, a private equity deal would make huge headlines because it was private equity. And now it seems like you see very few deals that don't involve private equity. And presumably some of the firms you're buying may also be funded and owned by some of these private equity houses. Do you see that as a positive thing for the industry, or does it raise any concerns?
It's just the reality of how it is. And I hadn't really thought of it that way. I guess it's because we've lived with it for so many years now, the last few years, certainly, that the expectation is it's just that's the way the market is. And so the way I always look at it is what's the opportunity for us and what's the opportunity to leverage there for us. I have to say, a lot of the acquisition deals, that we've done, almost all of them have in some way come across a private equity venture capital sort of opportunity and then have chosen to go with us. And that's because, like I say, I think we buy for strategy. We're buying for the culture fit, for the people and the type of work that we believe we can do together, and we can make each other bigger. And at the same time, hopefully become a great home for the owner or owners and their people, and they can see a life beyond the deal. And I think we've got a great story at Havas about a number of people who've stayed with the group beyond the deal. And certainly most of the deals I've done or been involved with, whether I've run it or just been party to it, I can't think of many that are along with the group, at least who haven't retired. And I've been with the group now 13 years. And we have had a couple of people that have retired since their burnout and since they continue to work with us for a while. So I don't have a problem with it. It is what it is. But I mean, be aware that they often operate differently. Not all of them, but some of them do operate differently around, sweating the agencies to maximize a return. And for some people, that's the type of deal they want. They want to maximize their, the sale and the blood, sweat, and tears they probably put into that agency, and that's fair enough. But the only concern I have, only because I've seen it with some friends of mine who worked in agencies that were bought in that scenario, that the work could get affected in terms of the quality.
Sure. So Havas has announced its intention to list, and I wondered if that's having any impact on the work you're doing to kind of consolidate and position the PR group.
Yeah, so we obviously were listed previously and then came under the Vivendi mothership for a number of years, and obviously now we've made our intentions sort of publicly available around potentially relisting Havas toward the end of this year or early next year, or whenever it happens. And obviously that's with the team in Paris to work through that. But obviously we want to be able to ensure that anybody that takes a shareholding in Havas sees the value in our work and in our group. And so from a PR perspective, that means it needs to be super clear of who we are, where we're going, and what the ambition is for that group. And now obviously we've got much more clarity in the work we do within the sort of global consumer agency in Havas Red, what we do in terms of public affairs and financial PR through the H Advisors network, and then some of our other more specialized agencies that exist. And so it's a lot easier for you to understand our group, the leadership, and where it's heading, as opposed to 4 or 5 years ago, where it was this tapestry of brands and kind of, all relatively successful in their own domestic market, but hadn't necessarily been tied together in a more strategic and powerful way for clients who are now coming to us for multi-market briefs, regional briefs, global briefs. And so I do think it makes the PR group much more powerful and more attractive to a shareholder if and when we get listed again.
Certainly seems to be value in simplicity, and in Havas, I suppose going from whatever it was, 27, 28 agencies down to I think it's 7 or 8 now. It's more simple for people to understand, and it's interesting because industry wide we're seeing certainly at the holding groups a trend towards greater consolidation, quite extreme consolidation in some cases where in some holding groups they're down to 1 or 2 PR brands now. Then you have some players I think that are very keen. So Omnicom is an example. It's very keen I think to maintain a number of PR brands. Do you have a particular view on this pendulum, which has kind of swung back and forth for as long as I've been covering this industry?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's whether you're coming at it from a position of strength or a position of weakness from a commercial perspective. And so, if you're moving deck chairs around, and okay, there may be some operational changes that actually then make you more efficient, but if at the end of the day, the size of your business ultimately is smaller than what it was before, then that comes with its own different set of dynamics and challenges. What we were focused on when we were rationalizing our brands was actually making us bigger and more powerful. And you've seen how we've continued to grow. And so our revenue has grown during that period of time. And in some of those agencies, in a very, very positive way. And I think it helps. We were kind of one of the smaller holding group networks as well. And so don't get me wrong, I think you're coming off a lower base. It is easier, or at least it should be, because when you're number one, you're the biggest. The only way is down. So you've got to, how do you stay at the top there? It's very hard. And so I don't pretend to know everything that's going on in the other holding groups other than what my friends and colleagues and people we know in the industry talk to us about. But the proof will be in the pudding in the next few years how successful they've been. And like I say, if you continue on a trend of actually ultimately the total revenue is shrinking, then surely that wasn't their strategy initially, was to have a business that wasn't growing, or at least maintaining where it's at. So for me, we've got to keep moving forward. We want to grow, but grow realistically, depending on the industry. But I do think people are smart. They can see what's happening, whether it's real change or whether it is just moving deck chairs around on the Titanic.
So you talked about growth, and you mentioned Havas Red's growth, which has been, much higher, I think, than the industry average 2023. And as you mentioned, yes, you're coming off a smaller base, perhaps, and some of your bigger rivals. But how do you see the remainder of this year? Are you similarly bullish? Because I think for many agencies are still finding conditions reasonably tough out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's still a soft market. I think clients are not as adventurous as they were with their budgets, and it's interesting because I'm still very, as I say, I have calls with I speak to my CEOs and MDs in market every month, and try to stay as close as I can to their economies. And it's interesting to see how things play through at different times. And every market pretty much is had a bit of a tough period in terms of generating opportunities with significant revenue that would actually then flow through quickly, because every person I speak to is saying it's taking so long for pitches to come to fruition. It's very a lot of things are being paused. Budgets aren't nearly as big as we expected, and then some markets have started to come back a bit quicker, and whereas other markets are just seeing what we saw, for example, in other markets, say in October last year, they're only seeing it about sort of in the last couple of months. But in general, it's been quite tough. I think toward the second half of this year, this first half of the year has been tough. I think, it's been relatively flat for a lot of markets. A couple of markets are growing, but not potentially at the rate we were. There's a couple of markets that are actually outperforming. But in general, it's not not terrible, but not amazing either. I think the second half of the year, things will ease, not become easy, but they'll ease. And then I think, 2025 will start to see, more confidence and consumer confidence in the market, which will lead to more clients wanting to spend. Of course, look, there are certain industries that continue to grow, but areas like tech and health, that's been an area that certainly have consolidated more of their kind of budgets in the last 6 to 9 months. But that will come back, I'm sure. And so, look, we've been through these periods of time before. It's never kind of straight sort of line to getting to where we want to get to. It's always going to be kind of zigging and zagging through these challenges, and each market's slightly different. But we back our senior teams to do a great job and to continue to kick goals for clients and continue to attract the best clients, the best talent in the markets. And it is a delight to see some of these agencies that I'm responsible for continuing to outperform the market, even in the current conditions.
Well, yeah, let's hope 2025 is maybe an easier year to kind of get to that kind of growth. Well, James, thanks so much for your time, and good luck with the network building. And take care of yourself, because I suspect you're traveling quite a lot from Australia.
I certainly spend a lot of time in airports, Aaron. But thank you very much for your time. It's a really enjoyable conversation.